Hello, you. I'm Laila Stancioff, your host, and welcome to the Find You podcast, From Sick of It to Simply You. Here, our guests will tell us about their transformational journey and challenges they have faced. You also learn tips and strategies on how to do it yourself. Ready for some inspiration? Let's start.
This is a special episode. Our guest, Skot Waldron, has a podcast that resonates with the Find You podcast, Unlocked with Skot Waldron. He's also the author of the best-selling Unlocked, a 52-week guide for the intentional leader. We will be talking not only about his personal transformation, from a designer to coach for leaders, but also about what triggers change in people's lives, sharing experiences from both of our podcasts.
Hi, Skot. It's very good to have you on the show.
Well, hello. It's wonderful to be here. And, if people want to hear more about you, they can just go to my show and hear how awesome you've been on my show. So I'm just trying to return the favor.
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting conversation because you already interviewed me twice. So now we're both here to ask questions to each other and share some thoughts because, well, you just have a new book. And there, so it was 52 steps. What was the full title of the book?
Yeah, the 52 weeks, a 52-week guide for the intentional leader.
Yeah. And in your book, there was one part where you talk about you have to know yourself, love yourself, to be able to lead yourself, because your book goes a lot on the leadership. And I remember when I started reading it, I was thinking, is it about really yourself, about leading a team? Like it was all very mixed because it's really personal development. And when I read this, that is know yourself, that's where it starts to be able to, create the life you want, which is very aligned to what we've been talking here in the podcast of what did I do to be able to find myself. So maybe you can share a little bit of how it was. You started with graphic design and then you started working as a coach. So tell us a little bit about that, maybe.
Yeah, okay. That sounds good. Maybe that can lead into the idea of the book and how, Unlocked the brand came to be. Really, I started my career, I came out of school, trained as a graphic designer and moved to Chicago, and I worked there for a number of years, working at a global design firm and doing design work and brand work for companies all over the world. And at some point in my journey, 7 years later, decided to move back south to Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm from. And we wanted to raise our family here. And this is where all of our family was. So we came down here. I started the Atlanta office for Multiple. That's the name of the agency. And I ran that for 12 years. So I was doing a lot of graphic design, a lot of brand strategy work, and going into companies. And I started to actually do some of this for personal brands. And I started to do like helping entrepreneurs and solopreneurs develop their own personal brand. Because they were like, oh, I don't have a big company and I don't know why I would use you. I was like, well, let's do this on the personal front and see what happens. So I started kind of coaching people through their personal brand development and doing some brand strategy work on that side. That's how we kind of got introduced to the idea of coaching and strategizing with them and consulting in different ways. And then one day I was at a speaking event. I started to do some speaking. That's when I started my speaking career too. It's kind of like mid 2000 teens, like 2015, 16, something. And I was speaking with another guy there, and he was speaking about leadership. I was speaking about social media strategy at the time. And he came up to me and he said, hey, I actually need some help with some of a product that I'm launching, and you can help me with some of the strategy work. And I also will trade you. I have a leadership cohort that I'm going to start, and you can be in that. And I said, leadership? Like, okay, like I don't really need it because I run a creative agency and we're cool. Like we have cool culture and people like me and I like them and I'm a good guy and I don't really need that toxic leadership training stuff because I don't, I'm just cool. And they said, just try it. And I said, okay, I'll do it. Let's just switch. We'll trade. And so I decided to do that. 2 months into this leadership training cohort, I was like, my mind was blown. I had no idea who I was, really. I was accidentally going through life. I was just kind of accidentally leading. I was accidentally communicating, and things just happened. Sometimes they happen. Most of the time, they happened pretty well. Sometimes they didn't. But I didn't really understand why, nor did I really tap into why. But this cohort led me to this journey of intentionality and getting to know myself better. I realized that I was communicating for companies all over the world for a long time. I was a professional communicator. That's what my job was, to graphically communicate things, a solution to a problem. But I didn't communicate myself very well with my team members, sometimes with my family, and I didn't really understand that whole thing. So throughout this journey of self-discovery and learning more about myself, I started to think like, and this was right when I'm probably starting to enter into my 40s. And I was thinking, what am I doing with my life? And that's when I was reading recently in a book, 4,000 Weeks is the name of the book. Brilliant book, by the way. And he was talking about how we have these kind of that midlife crisis type thing that some of us go through often. And it's because we are suddenly faced with our finitude, I guess you'd have to say, right? That we are going to sometime end. When we're younger, we don't think that's ever going to happen. When we're older, we start going, man, what am I doing? Like, what's the impact I'm having? As a graphic designer, I loved graphic design. I still love graphic design. But everything I did was so, I don't know. It was subjective at times. And it was also limited, I think, in its duration of impact. It would be around for a month. It would be around for maybe a year, maybe a couple years. But then when I started coaching and doing more of that, I realized the personal impact I could have and the lifelong impact I could have on people, not just in their jobs, but in their personal lives. And so instead of creating something temporary, I was creating something long lasting. And that is when all of a sudden it flipped in me. Like I also started doing less things for myself. Graphic design, winning awards, seeing myself appear in awards books and all types of things was like very self-gratifying, seeing my work out in the world. And I go, oh, I did that. Nobody else really cared, but I did. And then all of a sudden going, does it really matter? I don't know. Like to me, the impact wasn't there. And I said, this other stuff I'm doing is actually like, I'm having an impact on people's lives and it's switched for me. I'm not saying the graphic design can't have an impact on lives because it does every day. Everything we touch is designed. For me personally, it was that switch that went off in my brain. I finally knew myself well enough that I could follow to where I needed to go.
So quick question, the graphs you have behind you, are they yours?
No, because I ran a design agency. Paper companies want you to buy their paper and print everything on their paper, because we did a lot of books and other things. So they send you paper samples all the time. And then they send you, so I got cool posters and cool paper samples and books and all types of stuff for free from paper companies. So that's what those are.
Okay, so who wants to see those pictures will have to go to your podcast because we don't have video here, but you have video there. But I've seen them many times. I just had that question. So it's interesting when you tell your story because I was thinking how graphical that is of what happens to so many of our guests, at least the people that come to the podcast. Like first they're like, I'm okay, I have a job, like things are going. And then there's something that totally turns the world upside down. And you're like, who am I? What's happening here? Which in your case was, that course of leadership that made you think. What other kinds of triggers have you seen on your guests that made them, go through a big change?
I think a lot of the times it is accidental run-ins with things. Like, for example, I ran into this person at a speaking event and he presented me with this opportunity. I took the opportunity and realized something. If I wouldn't have taken that opportunity, I wouldn't have realized this thing that changed my life and the course of what I'm doing and where I'm going now. I think people oftentimes aren't necessarily looking for the change. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're just completely fed up with what they're doing. They're sick of it and they really want something different. I wasn't necessarily in that spot. I was frustrated with certain things that I was going through in my life at that time, but it wasn't to the point where I was just like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm gonna do something else. It presented itself to me. And I think that it's up to us and it's up to other people to recognize when that's happening. That oftentimes we are going through life accidentally and we are just living life. But if we don't at least stop and recognize what's happening, we might miss it. And if we are constantly saying no to everything, now I'm not an advocate of say yes to everything. I know there's people out there, they're like, you say yes to everything. You never know what's going on the other side. I'm like, no, don't do that. But at least be intentional about what you're saying yes to. And there may be something pretty beautiful over there. And you never know what'll happen.
Yeah, it's true that things sometimes just pop up. I was reminding one of my guests that she went into environmental activism because when she got pregnant, she was so sick, she couldn't do much. So she had a lot of time to think and she ended up, watching things, observing. And there was also another one that's, it was kind of provoked by her. Like she reached burned out with the work. And she had to stop for 2 months because the doctor said, either you stop or I'm going to put you in the hospital. But then as she had that time, she was also, noticing things and noticing how her relationship with her kids was changing, with the husband was changing, the time they spent together. And then from there, she created a brand that of clothes that allow you to touch. They have pockets that are actually holes. So for the whole oxytocin thing. So it's really, she was there and she realized the things that were happening around, and that became a big opportunity for that change. So yeah, it's true. Many things just, it's difficult to know what will be the final trigger of the change. You might have a lot of things that accumulate, but at some point it's like, yeah, there's really a thing that turns you upside down, and then the change starts happening.
And I think that if people here's an exercise, and I think that the theme I'm hearing with those two stories you just told me is that impact is what caused them to finally discover what they wanted to do and did it was where do I create impact? And that's kind of what it was for me too, is seeing the impact that I can have. And that's where purpose really drives us, and where it comes from is contribution and impact. What's our contribution we make? What's the impact we can have? That is your purpose. So if people really want to understand and discover what that is, just tell stories about things you've done in your life and moments of, actually, I would start with the impact. What are stories in your life where you created an impact, where you saw something happen that was awesome? Like you got really fulfilled by that. You finished it. Maybe you went and told a friend or a spouse or a family member about that thing because you were so proud of it and so excited for it. What was the impact that was, had there? And then also, what was your contribution in that thing? And when you understand those two elements of what was my contribution, what's my impact, you can start to go, oh, wow. And then you start to zoom out on that and you start to tell more stories and you start to say 3 to 5, 7 stories, what was the contribution? What was the impact? And you start to look for the trends in those things and go, oh, it's really my contribution is my ability to see clearly some things that people can't, others can't. Like I can discern and make sense of things that other people can't see. The impact I can have is that now they have clarity and they can move on with their lives. And maybe they can now be the person they were designed to be. Before they felt caged in, before they felt like they had to live in this box that was built for them. And they didn't feel free to be themselves because they're trying to fit themselves into this box that somebody else built for them. Or maybe they built for themselves because of other ideas they had about what other people expected of them. And now when they get out of that box, they feel free. They feel what I like to say is unlocked. They feel unlocked. They are not caged in anymore. And that is the impact that I want to be able to have on other people.
So that's where the unlocked came from, the idea of not being caged in. Like, where did you take that word from?
Yeah. So it is the idea of oftentimes we start with an injustice. So when I'm doing brand strategy work, because I'll do still a little bit of that with people that are building personal brands and developing who they are, or even with leaders that I coach, I will talk to them about permission. I feel often there's an injustice. And when we start with the injustice, we understand kind of the trigger of what makes us mad. Like, what's the injustice in the world that you see? What is the thing that makes you mad that you feel needs to change? And so when I look at that, I go, the injustice I see is that people don't feel they have permission to be who they were designed to be. People feel like, I have to be this, or I have to do this, or I got this job out of desperation because I needed a paycheck. And now I've got to do this role that I'm not really built for, but it was a job. So I took it. Or they had expectations of their parents early on. So they went to a school that they didn't really want to go to, but it was kind of like, well, I'll do that, or that makes lots of money. So I'll do that thing. And then they go into it and they're like, I don't know what I really want him to do in this. I'm not really built to do this. Or their boss does come to them, or parent or spouse or something, and say, you are this type of person, so you need to be in this type of box. That holds people back so much in life. That is the idea that I'm trying to fight. Birds aren't meant to be in cages. I know that some of you have birds and you have them in cages and whatnot, but ideally and naturally, birds are meant to fly. Birds are meant to be out and to do their thing. Unless you're a chicken, then you're not meant to fly. I totally understand. But if you are a bird, you're meant to fly. And the cover of my book and the logo unlocked for the podcast, it's these birds and they're flying out of the logo because that's the freedom that we want. The freedom we desire is to be that. And if we can have that and be that, give that to you. If I give that to you, you give that to me, how much freer will we be to collaborate and appreciate and do the things? Like, I'm going to let you do that, and you let me do my thing. And then I also need to come to you because I know you're good at that thing, and you come to me because I'm good at that thing. That unlocked idea is, I think that the idea is what I'm trying to do is to push and to fight that injustice.
What's interesting about what you said of look at the contribution and the impact you're having from the contribution you're giving. The problem really is if the person is on the wrong box, like encaged in the wrong cage, she might not even see a lot of impact because she's not giving the real contribution she could give, because that's so, like she's so framed. And there I can share even my experience when I was in Opus Dei, this Catholic institution. And I wasn't very normal there in the sense that, they wanted you to bring people in that looked like Opus Dei that maybe could, also join. And I always had these friends that didn't even want to know anything about the church. I would meet them like everywhere. I wouldn't necessarily bring them to the Opus Dei stuff. So there is like I always felt like I didn't have the impact I should have, by their standards. But I was just, I had a totally different approach, like a different way of looking at it. And I see that I can have much more impact now that I'm in a, freer situation, that I'm not having to deliver what was expected of me there. Because I was putting everything I could, but I had, I had this frame of how I should do it. And now that I came out, that I analyzed, I said, oh, wow, I really wasn't doing what they wanted me to do, even though I was trying, like it really didn't fit with me. So yeah, it makes sense to really get out of the cage so that you can really contribute. And if someone is not really seeing the impact, is that, you might not be contributing really as you with all the strengths you have. That might be what's missing.
Wow. Thank you for that. I've never thought about that in that way before. That is so good. Because your story is beautiful in the sense that um, that that box, sometimes the box is freeing for people. They need, but it's making sure it's the right space for you and that you're able to contribute the things you're able to contribute. Okay. So the thing with Opus Dei for you is that it wasn't necessarily a bad organization. It just wasn't right for you. It wasn't letting you be who you needed to be. It was saying this Opus Dei organization is for these type of people, and you need to conform to this idea if you're going to be here. So you tried to do that, and you just weren't happy, and you didn't thrive, and you felt caged in. And that experience was, I didn't realize that from our first interview. I got that from the second interview, your story, which was really, really cool to hear. That journey, like I can see it in you, right? That freedom and that like I can be who I've been designed to be now. And that's so good. If people are caged in, they can't contribute what they're meant to contribute. Therefore, they don't see the impact that they would love to have. Well done. Good job.
Yeah, because I was thinking, what if you don't see the impact? And it's not necessarily because you're a negative, depressive person. It might be you're really not creating what you could create. And well, spoiler alert, today in the morning, as I woke up, I started writing a third book, actually a fourth book, exactly about the Opus Dei thing. Because it's what you said. It's not a bad institution. It's a good institution. I believe in its mission, but somehow I felt caged. And I want to share like what were the things that made me feel caged so that other people that are there don't have to suffer the same thing just for, like the wrong leadership. Because, for example, one of the things that happens there is that people who leave there, you don't talk about it. Like the person just vanishes somewhere and someday you find out it went away. And there's not a lot of conversation about it. So it's a really taboo topic. And plus, whenever you talk about it, it's like, oh, the person just left her vocation, just left the path God wanted for her. So it's put in a negative way, And then that means that when someone is having trouble, and if you think about leadership here, if someone is having trouble, whoever should be the leader that should be helping that person doesn't really know what to do because nobody had this open conversation about how can I help this person find herself, figure out if it's here or not, but really find herself and, learn how to lead herself in the situation. The leaders don't know what to do. So yeah, that's my next book I started today.
Wow. You're one of those crazy people that writes multiple books. I wrote one book and I'm just like, oh, I don't know if I can do this again.
Because I finished one yesterday, the one about adoption. So suddenly it released my head. And then today in the morning, it's like, bazinga, that's it. Because I've been thinking how to write about this. And, I got that's who I have to write for. Like, that's the way.
Wow. Slow down. Let us all catch up. Wow. Like, that's crazy. I love it. I love it. One thing I do want to say about this too, there's a concept. So in my book, it's built out of, so it's called Unlocked, a 52-week guide for the intentional leader, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to build this for the person that likes short, punchy, actionable insights. reading long, in-depth, study-based books, I read them as well. They're very informative, but I don't have a lot of action I can take after I read them. This is like meant to be a 52-week guide to really becoming more intentional. And as we look at one of the chapters in there, one of the weeks, they're all meant to be read short and punchy. They start with a quote. Each one of them starts with a quote. And this one says, if you're comfortable all the time, then you're probably mediocre. The comfort zone is lined with defensiveness and excuses for why you should stay there. Some of us stay in the cage voluntarily because we're comfortable, because that's what we know, and it's scary to step outside. What I want us to all understand is are we making excuses to stay in the stage in the cage? Are we just being defensive about staying in the cage? When outside of that cage is a world of possibility for you. And if you are keeping yourself there, then you need to analyze why you're doing that and work through that process. If somebody else is keeping you there, then you need to understand why and have that conversation. And why is it you letting them keep you there? Or is it really a situation where you're trying to get out, but you feel forced? Like, I think there's a lot of analyzation that needs to happen there. So take that first step though, and understand, are you in the cage or are you out of the cage, and why, and what's going to help you move to that next step.
Yeah. And if you're afraid of going out, ask for help, listen to other stories. Like, there's so many tools out there, to help you have the courage to open it.
Which is awesome about your show. It's full of people that felt caged in and that have now unlocked who they are and now are creating an impact. So it's so inspirational. It's so transformative. And it can be, I think, for everybody else that listens.
I think this was a very nice conversation. Thank you very much. Let's do it again.
We might as well. We talk often enough, So one day we'll have to meet in person. I need to come visit your country someday, although I'll have to do it when it's warm because I don't love the cold. So,
well, I've been in Atlanta once, actually.
What? In the airport?
For work. I went to Alpharetta. So I drove from Atlanta to Alpharetta. Yeah.
Look at that. Alpharetta is a cool little town. So fun. Well, one day when you come back, we can hang out.
Then we meet. Thank you very much, Skot.
Thanks.
You just listened to the Find You podcast, from sick of it to simply you. It was wonderful to have you here. Stay tuned for the next episodes.